and welcome to RezStyle. I'm your host, Kimberlie Acosta, and my guest today is Doug George from the Akwesasne Mohawk Nation.
Right.
And I heard that you're having some issues with the border control. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. Akwesasne has a distinction of being the only Aboriginal community in North America that is divided in half by the international border. And since the Americans, the British, and the Canadians decided to do that, almost 200 years ago, we've had a tremendous amount of problems on the res with that. Recently, both Canada and the United States identified Akwesasne as an area of great concern, and they've attempted to impose new restrictions on what we see as our Aboriginal rights to cross the border freely. And on May 27th of this year, the United States and Canada entered into an agreement that allowed their respective police agencies to cross the border in pursuit of people they thought were engaged in criminal activity. And that was a concern to the people on the res. 4 days later, the Canadian government manufactured a situation where they said they felt that they were being threatened by the Mohawk people, and the agents on the Canadian Customs complex, which is located on the Cornwall Island part of Akwesasne, abandoned their posts. They expected that the Mohawks would react by occupying the building, and both Canada and the United States were then prepared to send in police forces in order to impose these new border restrictions. Now, the reason it was so important to us and to Native people across the country is that Akwesasne is a test case for Aboriginal border crossing rights. And both Canada and the United States were ready on June 1st to impose new rules that stipulated that Native people would no longer be able to freely cross that border, regardless of whether it was Montana or Arizona or Texas, and that they would have to abide by stringent identification standards imposed by both those nations on Native people. Well, when Akwesasne, the people of Akwesasne, refused to act in a confrontational way on June 1st, it kind of stymied that plan. And the United States and Canada backed off on imposing these new border restrictions. But since then, we've had a tremendous amount of problems, especially with the Canadian government. It refuses to meet with our leaders. It refuses to come up with a long-term solution for this controversial issue. And they say that Akwesasne has become a haven for various criminal activities. And yes, there is, smuggling does take place on the res. For most of the community, there is an open border, and there are individuals there who take things across in violation of her own Mohawk rules, as well as that of Canada and the United States. But we've always maintained that the solution is to remove the border and allow Akwesasne to once again become a singular community. And that problems will arise when alien governments try to impose their rules on sovereign Mohawk territory. So naturally we're going to resist, and we have.
And can you describe to the people, in case there's people out there that don't know, part of the reservation is in Canada.
Yes.
And part of it's in the United States.
Yes.
That's where the issue is.
Yes, and part of us is in Ontario, and part of us is in Quebec, and part of New York State, and we have to deal with various policing agencies, the FBI, the RCMP, the New York State Police, the Ontario Provincial Police. We have 3 Mohawk governments. One is traditional, that is ours. The other 2 were imposed upon us. Sacredist Tribal Council was imposed upon our community by the Americans, and a Mohawk Council of Akwesasne, which used to be called the Sacredist Band Council, that was imposed upon us by Canada. So you have a divided people internally, and trying to come up with any kind of cohesive, singular policy aimed at controlling the smuggling has proven to be virtually impossible, not because there's a lack of will by the Mohawks, but because the United States and Canada create the conditions under which the smuggling has been allowed to flourish, and now they're complaining that our community is a haven for this criminal network, when in fact we've asked for them to meet with us in good faith, and the solution is remove the border, allow Akwesasne to govern itself as the singular nation, and we will put an end to this smuggling activity ourselves. It cannot be done by external force. Now, the problem that actually has relevance to Native people, not just that there's going to be tighter restrictions on Anishinaabe or Tohono O'odham or Salish or Blackfoot, but it's also for Americans and Canadians as a whole, because Akwesasne is the area where for the first time military gathering equipment, pilotless drones and other devices are being used to spy on a civilian population. And the same equipment that has been used in Iraq, and Afghanistan is now being used at Akwesasne.
Why is that?
It's primarily because the United States is trying to find a way in order to bring that kind of intelligence systems to bear on any given population that they perceive as a problem or as a threat. And the Mohawks happen to be conveniently located, and so that's what they're using now. Is they actually, people see these drones, and the United States initially denied it, but now has confirmed that they're using this equipment to spy on us. And they also built the most sophisticated border crossing facility in North America. Is located on the western edges of Akwesasne. So that's all making our people very nervous. We see what the game is, and we're trying our best to maintain a disciplined, peaceful response. In the last couple of weeks, however, the Canadian government put the pressure on us by confiscating Mohawk vehicles who they say failed to report to the new temporary facility the Canadian Customs built in the city of Cornwall across the St. Lawrence River from Akwesasne. So we've had 24 vehicles taken from us, and they've assigned fines of $1,000 per vehicle. And this is an act of extreme provocation. And the Mohawk response is, well, let's set up our own border security agency, and we will monitor traffic. And then if Canadians maintain this position and refuse to meet with us, then we will close the border completely, because it goes right through our territory. And that's a major port of entry for the northeastern part of the United States. We're hoping it doesn't come to that, but there's not a lot of options we have at this point other than to try to secure our own territory.
And what do they think they have the right to be able to go in there and control what's in your nation? Yeah.
It's always been a problem. The Iroquois and the Iroquois Confederacy, of which the Mohawks are a part, has always been a thorn in the side of the United States and Canada, because our people have been adamant about maintaining our status as independent peoples. We've challenged American and Canadian jurisdiction. We've actually physically engaged in conflict with both of those nations in order to keep this thing called Aboriginal sovereignty alive. And it's just, we've always been a problem for them. And they figure that if they can break the backs of the Mohawks, if they can qualify the stance of the Iroquois Confederacy, then all the other nations will fall in line. And that as it goes with the Mohawks, so will it go with every other native nation in North America, and we're the test case.
Well, I want to thank you for joining with us and sharing us this information so we
Sure.
can get it out to the people.
Yes.
And thank you. Have a grand day.
Thank you, Kim. Now,